All right, got some good updates on the VHR build in the S13. So it does run now. Initially it fired up and ran on some starting fluid, but wasn't getting injector pulse. I did figure that issue out, and it was my ignition source. I was having a problem with not getting 12 volt on cranking. So once that was fixed, it fires up every time now. Initially, when we were having that issue, we used starter fluid, and we were able to get it running with the ECU Nats delete using Ecutech. But now it runs perfectly, fires up every time. Just a few little things that I've changed in like the engine bay since my last video. I got a little cheap coolant reservoir. I got to get a better hose for that. I replaced the brake booster, just some kind of maintenance picky things that, you know, it had a brake booster that, in my opinion, was spent. So I got it replaced, and just need to check for leaks, do a little bit of just double checking my work, because this project's been about a whole year in the works. But it's extremely close to running and driving, which is really amazing. So it's really loud, open header. One thing that I have to do here is I have to modify, is a VQ35 Y pipe, and I have the VQ35 headers, right? Because they don't make headers for the VQ37 specifically, but the VQ35 ones work. The Y pipe doesn't necessarily work all the way. So like I measured from flange end to end is 2175, and on the headers bolted up to the motor, it's 2275. So it's about 1 inch off. I just need to modify it, open up those flanges just 1 inch overall, and it'll bolt right up. And then I can bolt up to my cat back and everything like that. So that's almost sorted. So since the last video, I got the bucket seat in, added my little junction produce, lumbar support pad that I got from Japan at Up Garage. Got my Thrash racing knob on. I wired up a really nice radio. It's touchscreen, Apple CarPlay. Really cool having that kind of capability in an old car like this. Another thing that I did here is I modified and made a bracket and such for the throttle pedal, for the 370Z pedal. I heard that you can potentially use a G35 pedal, so I would ask, if whoever's doing your wiring, if you're doing this swap, I would have them maybe explore that, because I heard that pedal bolts in a lot easier. It's a lot less work. But this one wasn't bad by any means. I was able to reuse the mounting hole. I had to pull one little metal bracket off of behind here, but I essentially had a threaded rod, like rubber bushing, where the threaded rod goes all the way through, or it's double-sided. I used that. It actually was a bushing from an air intake kit, and it worked perfectly. But it's really sturdy. I can't shake it. It's not going to go anywhere. I bolted it as well to the floor. I put some rubber bushings underneath it as well to give it some foundation support, and plugged it in and all that, and she works. So it wasn't a whole deal. It took me probably all of 30 or so minutes. I gotta clean the trunk up. Trunk is definitely a mess. Let me move over here so I can show some of this stuff. So here's my wiring mess. I have an extra ECU sitting in here too, but I have the Vivo model motor under this ECU. I end up doing Ecutech. My other ECU has uprev, but it works. I may just keep it as a backup or potentially sell it. It has uprev with like the Nats deleted and everything. So I got a mess of wiring. I need to build like some sort of plate, or maybe so I can put it on the glove box. That's like my next step here, is figuring out what to do with that, how to organize it, put it away so that it looks good and it's not on the floor where it can be kicked and messed with or anything like that, or damaged. But my main issue, and let me get this light like where it won't get in my face. Here, let me do this. That works. So when you get the harness from Hexa, this is the standalone the Hexa harness. So we have, there's 2 wires, a pink and a red. This is direct battery, 12 volt. I fused it and it goes straight to my battery connection, my battery post in the front. There's a starter wire that's white, and this wire is if you're gonna have it like go to like a switch panel or something. I tied my starter signal into my key so it just fires up like it normally would. So this is not needed in that case. You can cap it off. This right here, this red wire, this is for fuel relay if you want to have it run to a relay. I ended up just putting my fuel pump on a switch that I have in the center console I'll show in a second. That worked well for me, but I'm sure you can have the ECU control where key on turns the fuel on. I may eventually do that as well, just because that is a lot nicer. And then this here, this is the ignition source. This was my problem where I was having the crank where it was not starting, and it was not getting fuel, but it was, you could spray starter fluid and the motor would fire up a little bit. So that was really just my fault. I used a ignition source that had 12 volt key on when I checked, but I never verified that it had 12 volt once I was turning the key and engaging the starter. And what was happening is it must have been a bad source, because as I was verifying it after it not starting for a little bit, I showed that it was like, it would drop when the key hit the starter. It would go to 1 to 2 volts, which would not give enough voltage for ignition for the ECU to run. Once I switched that over to a better source, it literally fired up right away. So, I mean, it's definitely a relief. It's nice to kind of get that sorted. So now I just got to finish up some little things, get underneath it, double check some nuts and bolts, make sure it's getting closer to, make sure everything's good, get it closer to the first drive. And I definitely have to raise it up some. The oil pan does sit rather low, but a factory oil pan would probably fit perfectly fine, especially with the sway bar. I had to remove my sway bar because I installed the Z1 pan. It does hold a lot of oil as well, which is nice, especially for what I'll be doing, which is mainly drifting. So, but yeah, I'm pretty happy. It's when you hear that first start, it gives you a lot of joy, and kind of makes all the hard work and the wait times and just the car sitting on jack stands for so long looking sad worth it in a sense. So the fact that it fires up, it revs, it's not throwing any weird codes, that's a win in my book. It sounds great, and once I get this Y pipe fixed, I'll post a video where I can show some exhaust clips, because I have an HKS Sport catback, and I'm definitely excited to hear what this thing sounds like with the little HKS Sport and the big muffler. So